our consultant. They're our consultant for this project. This was originally ordered to Greenplay LLC. They merged with Barry Dunn on January 1st. And through this merger, they're probably the preeminent consultant for this type of work, including the health and library, along with the Parks and Recreation integration. So with that, I'm going to let Pat and JR run the show here. They'll do a brief presentation and then get your thoughts on 8 or 10 questions. So thank you again for taking the time.
Well, and I was sort of in a group in December, but it was the one where we had all the power outages.
Okay.
Yes.
That was
The hit and
memorable.
miss
And
one.
and Pat, you had a tornado, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a tornado here, and one of our other cohorts, Dan, was actually, I mean, there was one on the ground at the time, so he was in the basement. So I told him just, I'll handle it. And then I called it a rain delay because I think we were off for 25 minutes or half an hour and then back on. So
Yeah, it was a fair amount of in and out, and I think I was probably out as much as I was in. So I'm glad to come back
Okay.
on another beautiful day.
great. Well, we've had snow and you've had snow, but so far so good all day today. So all right, looks like we picked up Jody along the way here. Okay, well, I appreciate the introduction, Corey. I'm Pat O'Toole. I'm the project manager of this integrated master plan. And as Corey said, we started out in the fall as Greenplay LLC, and I've been with Greenplay for close to 20 years, doing park and recreation master plans all over the country. I think over 650 of them by then. And we joined with Barry Dunn, and that gave us a lot more resources to do this with. And we also have a non-for-profit wing of Greenplay that we brought along with us called GP Red. And it is formulated with a board and what have you of tons of park and recreation professionals, health folks, and we have a huge think tank every couple of years. But the biggest thing is to really look at what Corey is trying to do here is expand that quality of life beyond Parks and Rec to encompass the healthy communities and the social services and what have you. So this is really the first plan that has, I'm going to say, taken it beyond. We see a lot of libraries included in Parks and Rec and community services, just like cemeteries in a lot of cases. But and sometimes we've been, I'm going to say we've done maybe a dozen of them with the Healthy Communities Initiative with hospitals and all that, but it's more of the quality of life and wellness perspective. So this is the first one of all encompassing. So we're excited about it. And with that, I'm going to let JR introduce himself while I pull up my PowerPoint, and then we'll go through that.
Okay, thanks, Pat. My name is JR Clanton, and I'm a consultant with Barry Dunn. I'm helping Pat out with this project. My background is in municipal finance, parks, recreation, and libraries. So excited to be helping you all out.
All right, check me one more time, JR. You got the big screen up?
No, it looks good. I think we figured it out.
Well, we figured it out, and then the next time I pull it up, it's the opposite. So I've got a second monitor here, so it's easy to know which way it goes. And then the next, that one time I got halfway through and somebody said it was wrong. So anyway, I want to go through kind of the process we're going through here. This is kind of start to finish. We started it in the fall. Had a couple of kickoff meetings to really outline the project, the timetable, the expectations. One of the big factors was to get all these stakeholders lined up and how we were going to do that. We did have, I believe, 4 focus groups in December, kind of between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then decided to have the rest of them this week. I think we've postponed it a little bit and settled on this date, and we were really going to be there in person until the COVID protocol kind of snagged us again. So we're still able to get the information we want. So we're kind of in that same, at the beginning of the project, the needs assessment phase circled there on the infographic. Included in that is a survey. So we will use all this information to put a statistically valid survey together. And so all of this wish list, brainstorming list will be able to be kind of prioritized out by the overall community. First week of March, we're looking at our GIS landscape architects to come in and do a total inventory assessment of every component and asset of the Community Services Department. We also will do a demographic community profile, and in all cases, we're going to have the subcategories of Los Alamos and White Rock, and then look at the county as a whole. So we'll be able to compare demographics with what the survey said in those areas with what the level of service says. We also have this, particularly with GP Red, we have this huge library of trends, and we're going to bring that forward and do our best to encompass all the information we have, as well as your local information on these other amenities or entities outside of true parks and recreation. We're also going to look at the Community Services Department and kind of how they operate. It's a pretty a cursory look at that, but we will come in at our second stage of public engagement and present findings. And we're going to do it in two different virtual presentations. One will be everything that we've seen and heard from everybody. The survey results will be there, demographics, those types of things. And then the second one's going to be concentrated on the level of service and the inventory analysis. So that's where we're really looking at, equitable access to amenities and kind of ranking that and looking at the disparities. We'll kind of finish that one with what we call a visioning workshop, which is to really look at those key issues that we've identified in all the different ways we've looked at things, and prioritize those. And then we're going to, at that visioning, look at what are the preliminary recommendations to those key issues. And then we'll come back and start writing the draft master plan and get that pretty much in a draft format to include an action plan with all the recommendations, the timetables, the capital costs and operational costs of those, and then submit those for review to the county and get back the edits so that we can complete the final plan, and then again present that for adoption. And then the last step in our flow chart here is the implementation, which is the crucial part of that. I'm going to let Corey talk to some of the projects that are in process and also some of the things that he's heard in his year that he's been there that we're going to also include in the wish list here.
Well, thank you. We're looking at a BMX track renovation. We recently had an RFP for this. The RFP came in significantly over what our estimated costs were, so we're going to go back to the drawing board on that. Brew Arena has new lights. We put up a new LED lights. We were able to decrease the number of light poles in half, and we put all the wiring for the lights underground, so the view corridor out there is much improved. We're right after the public input on the Pueblo Canyon Conceptual Trail. This is a long trail from approximately the library down to the Y. A couple of loops for our youth teams to use. Maybe a multimodal trail from North Mesa to downtown, a potential skills park. We've got the golf course improvements, which were recently approved by council. And then at the end of February will be county council and the school board will be having a conversation about tennis court sites and gymnasium space. And the tennis court is to try to develop a tournament level venue in our community so we can at least host our district tennis tournaments on some frequency, and then give our tennis community the opportunity to have some local tournaments. And then the gymnasium is currently thought about up around the Los Alamos Middle School. Then we've got some additional design funding for potentially something like that in White Rock. And then just some opportunities that we've I've heard, I found on other reports, other than staff already trying to incorporate our community health and our library and our recreation across all platforms. Everything else here is just a wish. Nothing is more than an idea at this point. These are things I've heard. These are things to maybe stimulate your thoughts on what you would like to see. But we've heard about a cover for the ice rink, camping upgrades to Camp May, artificial turf on athletic fields, pickleball courts, a splash pad up in the Los Alamos town site, all abilities or a boundless playground, exercise stations along the trails. With NNSA and DOE, we're looking at the conveyance of Rendahawk Canyon. There was some work done to identify that as a recreation area. Sustainable actions and environmentally thoughtful in everything we do. We have an opportunity to look at a master plan for North Mesa, the area between the tennis courts and the soccer fields. Potential master plan parcels in White Rock, cricket pitch, community gardens, lighted playgrounds, and then the one it's been on the radar for quite a while is the Tween Center. So again, these are all just ideas. So these are not happening. They haven't been fully vetted. We're just putting them in this process to kind of vet them. But again, maybe give you some thoughts.
Great. Thanks, Corey. Okay, one of the things as we do our analysis of the community services department itself is we typically look at 5 elements that create a healthy system. So we want to look at kind of the why they do things, who does it impact, are there any negative things that we need to see if we can correct, looking at the systems with the stakeholders and the folks that interact with the community services department, looking at that inventory and the assessment of the quality of it, but particularly connectivity and equitable access to these facilities. As we put our master plan together, are there any procedures or policies or maybe even ordinances that might need to be altered a little bit to allow the master plan to be implemented? And then one of the biggest things is to look at all the resources, particularly the funding sources to implement this plan. So part of what this healthy system is, we're asking folks, and these are kind of the things tonight, or we'll run you through a few questions here, is what are we doing at the community services, and is it working, and how can we improve it? And also want to extend that beyond the current community services to add all those other factors we've talked about, from social services and what have you. So with that, I'm going to throw some slides up here with some questions, and JR is taking notes, plus we have this recorded, and just like you to give us your thoughts. So what are the current strengths of the community services department? So what are they currently doing well? And then what are those challenges, weaknesses, or areas that they need to improve?
Should we just jump in, Jody?
Just jump in. There's only 2 of you, so.
Hi, Jody.
Hi, I don't have very good Wi-Fi I hope I'm going to be able to be heard.
We can hear you.
Thank you.
It's okay to mute your face.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one of the things we were thinking of, and this isn't exactly what you were talking about, but here in Los Alamos, we have a lot of elderly people. We have services for elderly people, but we need more assisted living. We need an upgraded nursing home. We need more end-of-life care, and that hasn't been mentioned yet.
Okay.
So if we could find locations to expand that end-of-life care, it would be good. We've identified a small plot behind in Eastern Area Park by the dog pound. There's a small area there that could be used, which is one of our recommendations.
Okay.
For me, I'm wearing two hats. One is as the director of the Firstborn program. We serve families prenatally through age 5, supporting them as they have their firstborn children, and sometimes more than just their firstborn. And I'm also on the school board, so I'll be speaking from both those points of view of the other end of the lifespan than Jody was talking about. And so I would urge, when you do look at the demographics, to put in the caveat of the lab hiring so many young families. And I'm not sure the 2020 census really captured the big shift that is going on right now towards younger families. And so just wanted to put that out there. I think the strengths, our library system is amazing. We have wonderful parks, the large ones, but also the neighborhood pocket parks are really important to families, especially of young kids, where they can just walk down the street to go to the park when they just need a little outdoor time, is really important. And so the maintenance and upkeep of those pocket parks, I would say, is on the list, but I'm not sure how high up the list. So I would like that to be in, have a good eye on that in the assessments phase.
Okay.
I think services for teens, like the teen center, has been really well received. Of course, it's a perennial complaint, probably, Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, since the first days of the town, that there's not enough for teens to do here. And so that's one way to help serve them. But the times when other entities like the ice rink or the pool have special events for the teens, I think that's really great, those kinds of collaborations. I'm excited to hear about the ideas out there for tennis courts, and that it's finally moving along. And will be a strong supporter of having enough courts in eight courts in one place for a tournament. That's something school board and county council folks have been talking about literally for 4 years, I think. Same tween center, a center for middle schoolers, has also been on the agenda for a long time. Challenges or weaknesses, I think having enough services for some of the subpopulations, like I had mentioned, are some of the challenges. And this isn't a question you asked right now, but it caught my eye when you put up, Pat, about 2 slides ago, looking at some of the, or maybe it was Corey, looking at some of the things that are on the near-term agenda. And the collaborations between the schools and the county council at North Mesa at the middle school for a gym or possibly even something a little larger than that and serving more purposes is very needed both for the community and the schools, and being able to share a facility that way would be great. Looking at similar ideas in White Rock, I just wanted to make note of the acreage. Pinon and Chamisa are both scheduled for rebuilds, those elementary schools. Pinon has almost twice the acreage that Chamisa does. And so it seems like if we're looking at a rec center kind of facility, that Pinon makes more sense because of the acreage, also because of the co-location right beside Pinon Park with the splash pad and the library and the play park and skate park and youth activity center, all that's there, the synergy of having one more facility right there at that spot and across the street from the visitor center, that makes sense to me. Something I just heard recently discussed was a rec center gym kind of space around Pinon would be amazing. What might it look like to have more of an arts focused kind of facility at Chamisa, if we're dreaming? And could it be a medium-sized performing arts kind of venue that's flexible, so not necessarily not a sloped auditorium, and then have other kinds of arts opportunities there?
Okay.
So I wanted to put that in the hopper.
Okay, well, and you've answered some of our questions down the road, and JR, I'm sure has slid them in there, but I want to circle back to your comment on demographics. If there is a local resource that has, let's say, accurate, believable data that could be a jumping off spot for us, we always check so that we don't, we use Esri, which is a subscription-based population predictor. And it's good that the 2020 census now has updated, their base point. You get 10 years down the road, sometimes it's not as accurate. But what we don't want to do is throw figures out here and have the big discussion over this great master plan that is that our demographic numbers are wrong. So
one thing I can suggest, well, the Firstborn program, where we provide services for young families, and I've been there 4 years, and we started off serving 55 families. We're now contracted for 75.
No.
And are full and could serve more if we were aggressively recruiting, which we're not. That's what we're funded for right now. That's capacity. Then looking at the lab, I would want to look at the lab's hiring data, and I have no idea how to break that fortress. Maybe Corey does. But looking at the ages of their new hires and their aggressive hiring plan, and not all of them will live in Los Alamos County, but a good chunk of them will. And especially I think the ones with younger kids are less inclined to want to commute.
Yeah, well, it's tough to
schools, and they want our schools.
Yes.
And it's tough to put things down based on what people might or want to hire and how many kids they'll have and all that. I was looking more for if there was a comprehensive plan that was done recently or something, or the planning department that has tracked this, that we can match 2022 numbers to, and then we can do our analysis through Esri. But we can figure that out when we get to that point. I just was curious if you knew of a report that everybody's kind of signed off on, so to speak.
Yeah, that everyone has signed off part is the caveat.
Yeah.
Right.
The reports
And
are
if not,
out.
we'll give them one to sign off. That's what. So,
Well, I'm presuming you've talked to Lannel and they're hiring, they plan to hire between 1,000 and 1,200 individuals to work at the pit production and to replace the aging population who is not moving, which is why we need more elder care. So that plan will presumably, if they hire all those people, that'll be 7,200 new families by 2025, probably 2027 now with the delays due to COVID. So that, if that is in the plan, that's in the DOE funding, as a matter of fact. And we will, as Ellen was saying, we will definitely need more space for younger people, more activities for younger people. And then for us old people who are just not moving away, that's what's taking up a lot of the housing. And you will be hearing, of course, you've heard about the housing issues. We also have the issue of, and Ellen, I know you've been through this because we certainly did when I was on the board, about the need for increased classrooms and bigger schools. But that isn't, I don't think that's under your purview, but maybe we should save some space. And Ellen, I love that idea about the art space at Chamisa. I've never heard it, but of course, as you know from the Chamisa teachers, those girls down there they really know how to do their art. So that would be, I vote for that. I haven't heard it. Let's get it on the list. I think the whole community would love to have something like that.
Right, it's been on the community's wish list, having a medium size, approximately 300 seat performing arts kind of facility that would also meet other needs as well, so that it could be a flexible space.
And
And-
why not down there? Why does it have to be in Los Alamos?
Exactly, we've seen that the splash pad is popular and people, it isn't as far from White Rock to Los Alamos as Los Alamos folks think. And so I would argue against having duplicate kinds of things like that specialty site, like the splash pad in Los Alamos. If down the road we had the space for it and the money for it, great, but we have an amazing splash pad, brand new. So to duplicate that now would feel a little strange, especially with these other needs out there.
Okay. Well, and again, we're not debating or making decisions tonight. We're going to put all this out in our survey and let the overall community kind of rank those for us. So, but we appreciate all the input that we will add to that.
One more in the challenges or weaknesses area, and this is somewhat community services, somewhat private enterprise, but so especially in the social services department, the lack of mental health providers in town. And I know the social services department has it on their radar, and it's a little outside the usual thinking of a Parks and Recs plan. But I would love to see part of this comprehensive plan be about how do we recruit and retain mental health, behavioral health services in town that serve all ages. There's an especially acute lack for children and teens, but really across the board.
Okay.
And so how can the social services department perhaps help with office space or other ways to support folks coming here to do that work.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the next questions, a lot of which you've already given input, and that is, what additional programming, activities, and services do you feel should be offered by the Los Alamos County Community Services? And what new facilities and amenities you'd like to see, and what improvements you'd like to see to exist? So any additional?
I
Stuff.
have one that might feel obscure, but I don't think any more obscure than pickleball. And that's roller derby. A flat track space that could be used year round. Right now, the women and girls practice and compete at the ice rink when it's not iced over. And the main competition season also overlaps pretty well with the monsoon season. And so when teams come here to play, and they do from as far away as like Washington State, then if there's a monsoon coming through, there isn't a safe facility. They go into Pueblo Gym, but it's not really safe, and there's no place for it's just too small, and there's no place for spectators. And then in the winter, using the little gym in the Y, again, I think the group is grateful to have that space, but it's way too small.
Okay, so bottom line is to add a dedicated roller derby facility. For
Right.
year round.
Right, or if one of these more flexible spaces is coming online, and it could be a shared space, they can use a gym floor and do just fine. And
Okay,
yeah, so roller derby.
great.
And I already mentioned a medium-sized performing arts.
Uh-oh.
I think I mentioned most of the things on my list. Did you have more,
Okay.
Joe?
No, and I appreciate all the things that you've added.
Okay. So are there any portions of the county that are underserved by the Community Services Department? And also, who are some key partners and stakeholders within the community that can help implement this master plan?
We've already talked about the middle schoolers, Jody's point about the end of life care.
Mhm.
I think key partners and stakeholders, I love what's been going on with the schools and the county, with our rather unique funding structures for education. If large amounts of capital project money come to the schools, it gets swept by the state equalization grant plan. And so we only keep 25% of it for the schools. But if it's a county capital outlay project, then we get to keep it all. So that's how the monies in the state to do some of the planning work.
Great.
The North Mesa Rec Gym and a White Rock facility, that's how that's. So I think definitely. And then another key partner I would say is the nonprofit sector.
Yes.
Some of whom have county contracts to offer services. Others who get their funding elsewhere. But having that collaboration can certainly make those dollars go a lot further on for both sides.
Okay.
And I would love to see some of these surveys going out to teenagers and hear straight from them.
Well, one of the things that we're going to do is now that the statistical balance survey will be randomly distributed per household with the instructions to fill out on behalf of your household. So if there's teens there, we would hope that they would seek their input. But we're going to take the exact same survey and we're going to put it online and we're going to publicize that link. And we can certainly, put a QR code or the link in the middle schools and high schools. They'll be able to fill it out on their mobile phone. And we are looking for the possibility of the online having a little bit more detail in it, because in the paper version, you've got to kind of keep it at a certain length or people they'll fill out part of it and get tired and quit. So we've kind of figured out that sweet spot and actually have a survey firm that does this with us all over the country that's kind of perfected that. But online, we can maybe get to a point where if you answer this yes, then you go to these questions and get a little bit more detail with some toggles. So we will tally them separately, but we compare them and we certainly use it as an important tool. It's just, we don't mix them together so that we can retain that validity. So, but yes, the idea is for anybody and everybody to take them and to push them into as many of the demographics, particularly those that don't typically be, aren't heard. And from that perspective is what we're relying on the county to get that link out in every way, shape, or form and tackle those. So
And we were also working with Christine to get into the middle school and to some of the after school programs to talk with the kids directly with this same presentation.
Cool. This is Christine Koblenz.
Yeah.
Awesome.
okay, we're ready to move on. And again, anything else comes up, shoot Corey an email. He'll get us that information. If you after the fact, think of something, I wish I would have said. Okay, our last two questions are, what are the key issues and values that Los Alamos County Community Services need to consider, and we need to consider making sure that we salvage in this integrated master plan? And then what are the priorities in your mind? So if we can't do everything, what's your 1 to 2 top items that need to happen in your opinion?
Well, on this, I'd like to, previously I was speaking as a board member of the nursing home board, and now I'd like to speak as the chair of the Patito group of the Sierra Club. When you talk about values, the open spaces are pretty prime. And that's one of the ways that we identify as being in Los Alamos. And even the newcomers, I think, will get used to the place and understand how valuable these open spaces are. So as we begin to develop areas, let's try to keep our wildlands wild and develop brown fields rather than new green space. And we've got a lot of trashed out areas. And I know this may not be part of the purview, but the nature in Los Alamos is one of our values. So I'll put that in. And then, of course, Ellen is really tapped into the community of people, whereas I'm more tapped into the community of wildlife, trees, canyons, that kind of stuff, and old people.
I agree with everything Jody just said, and I think the values of health and wellness, we always rank up there as top healthiest community in the state, and rival some of the Colorado towns, and And so I think the outdoor recreation and indoor supports that. Um, we have a really involved community in a lot of specialty groups. And I think that's one of the things that make us thrive.
Yep.
And I think as far as priorities go, I think the more that Los Alamos can capture the new lab hires to live here, I think it will help with some of the imbalance of demographics, and revitalize the town in a way that small business hasn't succeeded yet, but I think having the population here will help people who have want to go out and do stuff and be able to shop locally and do stuff locally. So I would really like to see young families have a high priority here.
Great. Okay, anything else? Well, like I said, anything else comes to mind, shoot it to Corey and he'll get it to us. So I want to finish with just kind of the next steps. We talked about Thursday night, doing an open public webinar. The county has the link for that. If you click on it and register, it's open to all. We can, we'll run it a little bit differently than this one. As we will put kind of a summary PowerPoint of what we've heard so far to date in these same question areas, and present that and allow everybody that's on there to have their input. Typically a lot of chats are typed in as we go, and then we'll also open it up at the end as well. We're also going to come in and do a county commission work session on February 22nd, kind of with the same thought in mind. Here's what we've heard so far, what's their input, before we then we'll start putting the survey together. So that inventory assessment will happen early March. The surveys probably somewhere around mid to late March, and then coming in after the survey results are all tallied and analyzed, and we've done all of our analysis work and demographics and all that stuff. Come in and do the findings presentations, as well as the inventory assessment and level of service assessments, and then do the visioning workshop, probably looking at that May. And then from there, we'll start constructing the draft report. So just kind of an idea of where we're headed, and hope you guys will stay tuned for the whole process. And
I'd like to ask one more question. Have you been dealing with lab management? Because what the lab decides is what is going to happen. Whatever the lab decides on the other side of the bridge is really going to impact this side of the bridge. Are they going to continue to be hiring 1,000 to 1,200 individuals equals that many families? Have you been able to talk to them?
Not individually, unless they've been in some of these focus groups. So I mean, Corey, I don't know if you want to address that or.
Yeah, we've talked to some mid-level management. We haven't talked to the upper management.
Yeah, I think it would be really critical to invite them to either an open meeting or a confab, because we really need to know what they're doing, especially with local resources. Water is a big issue, as you well know. And the power, the electrical grid, everything that they're doing is impacting the community. So even if we have these wonderful plans, whatever the lab does is going to impact those plans. So yeah, give them a call.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks again for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Again, if you've got any more thoughts, please give me a shout. If you want to keep up with this or somebody asks you about it on the county webpage, if you hover over the government icon, over to the right, there's a projects tab that will go, if you'll go to community services, you can keep up to date with all these meetings and the transcripts from these meetings to keep abreast of this project. And again, as Pat reiterated, we're really early trying to craft this, and we want to get a good product because my desire is to get all these ideas that we have in the community, get them in one place, get them prioritized, and then let's go make some stuff happen. It seems some things take a little while to happen up here. I think if we had a community conversation about it, that would kind of help alleviate some of those problems, is saying that, hey, the community voted on this. This is what they decided were the top ones. Let's go make it happen.
I think that's great. And I don't know if I said this in the beginning, but I love the scope of this, that it's not just a Parks and Recs with a little bit of other, that it really is across the community services division, and that integration. That's really visionary, and I appreciate that y'all are doing it that way.
Thank you so much.
Yep,
Thanks for
thanks
taking
for
your
your
time.
time.
Stay
Thank
warm.
you.
Be safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.